You're listening to Glove Up or Shut Up on the Angry Marks Podcast Network.
You're listening to Glove Up or Shut Up on AngryMarks.com with Peter H. and Stevie J. Find them on Twitter at HardcoreCDN and at AngryMarks. And now, for all the news, reviews, and interviews in mixed martial arts, it's time for Glove Up or Shut Up from AngryMarks.com.
And welcome everybody to another episode of Glove Up or Shut Up right here on AngryMarks.com. My name is Peter H. I'm joined once again by my co-host from Omaha, Nebraska, Stevie J.
Welcome to Glove Up or Shut Up, where we're going to talk about UFC 196, Cain Velasquez versus Fabricio Werdum. Oh, wait a minute. We're going to talk about UFC 196, Fabricio Werdum versus Stipe Miocic. Oh, wait a minute. We're not going to talk about that either.
No, we're going to talk about how many times Peyton Manning said Omaha in the NFC title or AFC title game.
I can tell you how many times he said it that made a difference. 2, because they won by 2 points.
Oh, man. All right. So the big breaking news this week, UFC 196 went from having a main event for the heavyweight championship to a changed main event with Cain out and Stipe Miocic in. Now, Werdum has pulled out of the fight, so...
Yeah, do you find it suspicious that Werdum waited to pull out until a day after Stipe was announced as his opponent? Do you feel there's any conspiracy there?
The comments that I read basically stated that Werdum is dealing with some injuries, and if it was anybody else but Cain Velasquez, he would have pulled out of the fight a while ago. But because he has so much respect and mutual admiration for him...
See, I don't know if that statement makes it better or worse, because that's implying that he has no respect for Miocic. And if I was Miocic, I'd be pretty pissed off about that.
Well, being pissed off is their manager's job, but you gotta think, when it comes to something like this, especially in the heavyweight division, and these guys aren't young fighters anymore, every fighter is walking into that cage with some type of an injury nowadays.
Yeah, I just said that in an interview with somebody last week. I said there's no such thing as a 100% training camp where you come out completely injury-free. You can't get through a camp and not have some kind of injury. You just don't want it to be a severe injury that keeps you out of the fight.
A couple of years ago, I was reading an interview with this fighter. I think it was a feeder system to World Series and fight. Like, it was like a minor league promotion, right?
Like Legacy or something like that.
Yeah, something like that, one of them.
Yeah.
And the fighter was talking about his training camp, and the reporter asked him, you know, have you had any injuries, any problems with this training camp? And this guy was either young, stupid, or both. I don't know. But he said, yeah, no, nothing much, you know, just the odd scrape here and there, you know, nothing serious. Got my lights knocked out twice, but other than that, fine. I had to rewind it because I was like, wait, what commission...
Yeah,
if you commission would allow this?
If you admit to having two concussions before the fight, you're not getting the fight.
He did get the fight.
Oh, really? They still let him fight after saying that?
Minor league promotion. He probably didn't declare it on the form.
Oh, man.
But can you guess which state it was?
Texas.
Very good. It's like when a Canadian is too polite. So, UFC 196, the big news is... I can't remember them ever doing this, but it is no longer a pay-per-view event. It has been bumped down to it's been bumped down to UFC on FS1.
Well, as I told my wife tonight at the gym before we came home, nobody was paying $54.95 to see Johnny Hendricks versus Wonder Boy. That's not a pay-per-view marquee fight. No disrespect to either man, but it's just not.
Hendricks and Wonderboy. Yeah, the fight's going to happen in Vegas at the MGM Grand Garden Arena. I know it's not the first time they've ever held a show there, so they know the crowd. Without the pay-per-view revenue, do you think tickets are going to be hard to get for this show? Do you think it will be a buyer's market or a seller's market? I mean, what do you think is going to happen here?
Actually, I'm assuming most of the tickets were bought up during the pre-sale for Fight Club members and the pre-sale for the general public and then the on-sale because they all wanted to see that heavyweight fight. So the tickets are sold. It doesn't matter to UFC. They got the money already. See, the same thing happened to me when I was going to a UFC in Vegas and the fight was booked months ahead of time to be Brock Lesnar versus Frank Mir, and Lesnar got diverticulitis, and then they didn't find a replacement opponent for Mir, so the whole thing got scrapped. But my tickets had already been printed and mailed, and they still said UFC Lesnar versus Mir, even though that wasn't the card we were getting that night when we got there.
Do you think this card is snake bit?
I don't know if you could say that unless like every main event fight got changed, because we saw that for a show in Canada once. But
Calgary.
you got it. But this is not rising to that level. However, with a fight of the caliber of Cain Velasquez and Fabricio Verdum being pulled off the card, it definitely feels like the whole thing has taken a step down. So making it a televised card instead of a pay-per-view is the right way to go in this case.
Well, we've got 4 fights on the main card, 4 fights on the FS1 prelim card, and 4 fights on UFC Fight Pass. And if you have Fight Pass, there's a very interesting fight as the main event for the Fight Pass fights.
Yes, Mickey Gall and Michael Jackson, and only one of these two men can earn the chance to face CM Punk. If Mickey Gall wins, he gets a fight with Punk. If Mike Jackson wins, he gets nothing.
What?
He gets nothing. Mike Jackson does not get any shot at Punk at all.
So if Gale loses, what happens?
If Mickey Gall loses, then he doesn't get to fight Punk. But it doesn't, the winner doesn't get Punk. It doesn't work that way. They're basically bringing in a guy for Mickey Gall to beat, and if he doesn't beat him, then he doesn't deserve the fight. That's the way it's going.
So CM Punk's going to be cage side and rooting for Michael Jackson?
No, I think he would root for Mickey Gall because he actually wants to fight somebody. Trust me.
It's
Now, Peter,
welterweight.
you seem confused by this, but trust me. Go out there and look for some footage of Michael Jackson, not the King of Pop. Look for the
I was going to say.
Look for the one that fights mixed martial arts. Watch his fights. You'll understand why there's literally no way, no shape, no form, no how that this guy gets a match with CM Punk. I'm not saying a fighter is a jobber because we've been through that discussion before.
Mm-hmm.
But if ever there was a jobber in mixed martial arts, Mike Jackson is that guy.
Well, I look at it like if CM Punk's going to be there scouting his opponent, maybe it's good that he's going to see this firsthand. You know, he'll get a good pop from the crowd when they show him on the big screen. He's going to experience firsthand what, you know, his opponent's going to bring to the octagon, basically. And the only question I have for you, now I haven't heard anything on this issue, but how is CM Punk as far as weight management concerned?
I haven't heard anything about it either. I'd have to talk to somebody from Duke Rufus training camp at Rufus Sport and find out because I have no insider information to give you at the present time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if CM Punk makes weight, he'd be fighting at 170, so
I don't think that would be a problem. He's kind of a skinny guy to begin with. I don't think welterweight would be that hard for him.
Well, I think he said in one of his documentaries he was vegan or at least vegetarian now.
Well, if he's vegan, he definitely wouldn't have a problem because once you cut out meat and cheese from your diet, you shed pounds pretty quick.
You ever go on the vegan diet, Stevie, out there in Nebraska?
No way. Not here. We're a meat-eating place. We're a steak and potatoes place. In fact, I had a pork tenderloin for dinner tonight, and it was delicious.
Stevie J's food reviews right here at AngryMarks.com.
Oh, yes. In fact, I'll go one further. It's not just a pork tenderloin. It was a hickory pork tenderloin.
Oh, damn. Do you get some good old JR's barbecue sauce on that shit?
No, you wouldn't need the barbecue sauce because the flavor is seasoned into it before you make it.
Are you barbecuing it, or?
No. Just that it's like a dry rub that's on it with the flavor.
I gotcha. Okay. Where was I? Steak, potato. All right. UFC.
Yes, back to this card on FS1. Actually, you know what fight I really like on the Fight Pass?
Mm.
Artem Lobov versus Alex White.
Really? I thought you would have said Justin Scoggins and Ray Borg.
No, I'm more interested in Artem because of what he did on The Ultimate Fighter, how far he got on that show when he came in as basically a journeyman level fighter with like an 11-10 or a 10-9 record. It was just over 500, and he didn't even make it on the show, and somebody got injured, and he was brought in as an injury replacement, and he almost went all the way on the show. And they kept pointing out over and over again that he and Conor McGregor were buddies from the old days, that they used to sleep on the floor in the gym when they couldn't afford rent for a place to live. You know, they talked about how these guys had seen the rise of MMA in Europe and had been there for the whole thing. So I think Artem Lobov has one of the most interesting stories of any guy on this card.
Well, next week we're going to break down this card fight for fight, but we got lots to get to this week. But UFC 196, that's the big change. But let's just get the news out of the way, and we'll start in Bellator, actually we're going to talk about this fight coming up, Bellator 148. Ryan Couture has said that he says the pressure of this fight will break Pitbull Ferrari.
I actually feel the same way. I wrote in my preview that it was a bad idea for Patricky to take this fight after just losing a fight at Bellator 147 in December. I don't think his head's in the right place, and it's too short an amount of time to peak physically for another fight. He's trying to turn it around quick and avenge a loss and get back in the win column, and I don't think you want to do that with Ryan Couture, with a guy that's as skilled as a grappler and a jiu-jitsu practitioner as he is. Not saying that Pitbull is an easy guy to submit, because he never is. He's only been submitted once that I can think of. But short camp, trying to avenge a loss, putting too much pressure on himself to do that. I think Ryan Couture is probably going to have his way with him.
Well, they never ever call Ryan Couture a second-generation fighter.
Well, he partly does that on purpose because he wants to be his own man, and that's partly because when he was still in UFC, they really couldn't because his dad was on the outs with the company. So he's kind of developed his own identity, although his dad is always there for his fights, unless he's like filming a movie.
No. All right, so let's continue on the Bellator trip for a second here, because I heard a wacky rumor that the winner of Shamrock Gracie is going to fight Pat Miletich?
There's talk of it. Miletich, I believe, has expressed interest in coming out of retirement for it, but I haven't heard of Bellator signing that fight, and they certainly haven't sent out a press release confirming that fight. Right now, that's just a bunch of chatter and some wishful thinking.
Speaking of wishful thinking, another fight in Bellator that might happen or might not happen, Paul Daly and Josh Koscheck.
Well, Daly definitely wants to fight. Look for my interview with him on MMAmania.com this week, because I talked to him at length, and he said that Josh Koscheck should fight him, but he doesn't get the feeling Koscheck wants to fight him. He thinks Koscheck is running away from the fight.
Well, Koscheck's got what? One good fight in him left? Maybe two?
Yeah, well, if it's one or maybe two, then he should take the one that gets the biggest payday, and a rematch with Paul Daly would be that fight.
Let's go back to UFC with the Cain Velasquez withdrawal. Do you think he's done?
I'm starting to wonder. I know I've stuck up for him before during the long periods off when he's been injured and not able to take fights, and said that he was still the best in the world and that he would prove it once he got back and was injury free. But the guy gets injured way too much. And I don't know if that's because they just train too aggressively or if it's because his body is breaking down after so many hard fights, but I'm thinking that fight with Verdum was more indicative than I initially gave it credit for. At first I was like, well, he was rusty, he'd been away for too long, high altitude, he ran out of breath, but maybe, just maybe, if we were seeing that fight in Vegas at the MGM Grand, the results would be exactly the same. Maybe this is just Cain Velasquez is no longer the alpha of the heavyweight division, and Verdum has ascended to the throne at admittedly a very unique and late point in his career, but sometimes guys do peak late in their careers. It's not the first time we've seen that happen. The aforementioned Randy Couture is a good example.
I could see them doing sort of like another Ultimate Fighter team versus team, have AKA fight someone, but have Kane as like the head coach.
Yeah, he might be better served in that role as like a coach or a trainer or an on-air analysis type person, commentary, but I don't know if we're ever going to see him come back and completely dominate the heavyweight division. I feel like that time may have come and gone. I hate saying it, but just the sheer number of injuries that keep cropping up. I mean, we don't want to end up with the Dominic Cruz type situation where he only has one fight in 4 years and then comes back and wins the title, which he could do. He is still that good, but at the same time, you want a fighter who's around a little more than that.
Exactly. Speaking of commentators, any update on Kenny Florian?
Still suspended, that's all I can tell you.
Yeah. All right, UFC Fight Night 84 in Australia. A new fight has been added as Ross Pearson fights Abil Torrio. Interesting fight. I don't know. It's in Australia. It's going to happen soon, so...
It's kind of a risky proposition for Pearson, don't you think?
A little bit.
Yeah, that's...
He loses, he could be screwed, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not like it's been that long ago. He just fought at Dillashaw versus Cruz and taking a fight again, obviously he's got a little time to prepare. It's not like Fight Night 84 is happening tomorrow, but if he loses 2 fights back to back in like 4 out of his last 6, that might just be the chopping block.
Speaking of fighters in the chopping block, we were talking about this a few weeks ago, that a certain fighter might be close to getting cut because he's getting up there in age and is losing all his fights. Anthony Perosh has called it a retirement. He's 12 fights in the UFC. He's 43 years old.
So he didn't let them cut him, he cut himself.
That doesn't sound right, but yes.
Well, it didn't sound right when you said he'd called it and then I thought you were going to say he called it a career, he called it a day, and then it's like, where were you going with that sentence, Peter? I didn't quite follow you.
I was trying to think of an Australian way to say it, but I had nothing.
Call it good day, mate.
Good day, mate. There you go. Alright, so... there's a fight that was canceled for Brazil, UFC Fight Night 87. And it was a fight that I had circled on my calendar for that card. Matt Brown and Damian Maia.
Ooh.
Sorry, no, I reversed that. Sorry, it's been added to the card. Blech.
Okay,
I'm having a day today, folks.
You are. you had me concerned there because that would be the whole point of watching that card would be that fight. It would be kind of like this UFC pay-per-view that you're saying is snake bit. Without that fight, what would be the point?
Yeah, it's time of day where you look at your writing in your notes and you mistake one line for another and you're just like, oh, right. Not what I was reading there a second ago. Oh, alright, so we already talked enough about Verdum and Kane. Miocic already said that. Okay, now I'm going to give you the floor for this one because you know more about it than I do. But explain what's happened in the New York courts there with UFC.
Okay, as you recall from previous discussions on this show, UFC booked themselves a card at Madison Square Garden. Not any fights announced for the card, not any intention per se of running a card, but they had to book a card so they could challenge the law on the books in the state of New York and say, this is unfairly interfering with our business practices. We need an injunction from the court because this law is invalid and shouldn't apply, and it's interfering, it's causing harm to our company. That was their argument. And the district court judge that reviewed their appeal for an injunction, I wouldn't say he laughed in their face, but he said, this has no merit. The law in the books is the law in the books. You can't book a card just to get us to give you an injunction to suspend the law. So we're throwing out your appeal for an injunction. Peter? Hello.
So we shouldn't concern ourselves with a fight in New York in 2016?
Unless the New York State Assembly changes the law or passes a new law, you're not getting any fights in New York. At least not professional sanctioned mixed martial arts from UFC, Bellator, or anybody else. You'll get some amateur fights, which was part of the reason that UFC was challenging the law, was that the law is vaguely written and it allows amateur fights that are actually much riskier and much less safe, and not sanctioned fights, which would be supervised with doctors and ringside officials. So, in Dana White's view, New York is actually making it more barbaric by trying to ban what they consider barbarous. And he's got a point.
So, I'm just trying to get an idea, because, like, New York is one of, 5 states left in the U.S. not to have MMA?
Well, the way UFC spins it in their press release, they're the only state in the union that doesn't sanction or regulate mixed martial arts. Now, you can debate what the terms sanction and regulate mean, but basically their claim is it's legal in 49 out of 50 states, and New York is the lone holdout.
And if you go up to Canada, technically it's the law on the books prohibiting mixed martial arts. There was a law, a federal law. It was sort of like a prize fighting law, and that stood in the way. And then when the bill got amended to legalize mixed martial arts, it was legal from BC to Newfoundland. You know what I mean? Like, doesn't matter what province it is.
Right. Everywhere, everybody. But unfortunately...
So why not skip the state level and go right to the federal?
The federal level is never going to take up a national law regulating mixed martial arts when it's already legal in 49 out of 50 states. That's a waste of time.
Okay. Well, frig, it's been going on for so many times at the state level, might as well try another avenue.
Yeah, but you're really... I mean, honestly, I know you're in Canada and I'm in the United States, and also, I'm probably a little more cynical about this than you are, but do you really expect Congress to pass a bill to regulate mixed martial arts statewide in the U.S.? Congress can't even pass a bill to fund their own government to keep it afloat. You really think they're going to regulate mixed martial arts for the entire country?
What's that lame joke I remember? What's the opposite of Congress? Progress?
Indeed.
I was at an indie wrestling show on the weekend, and somebody had a sign that said, "Vote Trump."
Ooh.
So someone asked me, is he still winning in the polls? I'm like, yeah, 41%. They just give me a look like,
all right, let's
confusion. And it was funny because I'm at a wrestling show, and that's what's confusing them. Okay, sure.
Let's not even talk politics on this show, because we got all kinds of listeners from all different political beliefs: Republican, Democrat, Independent, Socialist, Conservative, whatever you are.
Mm-hmm.
We love you if you love mixed martial arts. So my personal views on Donald Trump are not important to this show.
All right, I sense you need a good laugh, and I got a good story for you.
What's that?
So, how old is your driver's license photo?
It's probably about 8-9 months old now.
Okay.
Because I had to take a new one last year.
And how often do you have to renew your driver's license photo?
It's 5 years you can renew it by mail, 10 years you have to do it in person.
Okay, so for the next 4 or 5 years, or 10 years, whatever it is, Carlos Condit will have a reminder of his last fight.
Oh, he had to renew his driver's license and he still had a black eye, didn't he?
Yes, sir.
Oh, that's kinda smart.
He put the picture on Instagram.
That's great. At least he's having a good laugh about it.
Now, did you hear the rumor with you at the well, not canceled, but the I don't even know the right term to say it, but the UFC 196 show that got relegated, I guess, to Fox Sports 1, for lack of a better term.
I'd say
demoted. There you go.
Yes.
You know what? Did you hear the John Jones story?
What, did he offer to step up and fight Stipe Miocic?
But only if the heavyweight title is on the line.
It's funny you would say that because my wife, not following UFC as closely as either you or I do, actually proposed that to me at the gym. She said, "What about John Jones?" And I hadn't heard this rumor, and I said back to her, "Well, he has talked about going up to heavyweight, but I assume he wouldn't want to do it on short notice." So apparently what you're telling me is he would have done it if they had put the belt up.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think Fabricio Verdum was just going to hand over the belt without losing it. Not after what he had to go through to get it.
You want it? Come and get it.
Exactly.
Chad Laprise is fighting Alan Patrick, UFC Fight Night 84 in Australia.
Cool.
And Victory Fighting Championship will be in Iowa on February the 19th. With the show is in Iowa, so what makes this newsworthy is that Victory Fighting Championship just signed a deal with Fight Pass.
Yeah, I in fact saw that was on the upcoming schedule of events they were playing.
Let's see. Sage Northcutt, we'll talk about him later. Josh Barnett, but that's just more trash talk.
What? Barnett talking trash about the upcoming card this weekend?
Yeah. It was more with he doesn't buy Verdum's excuse.
Oh, I thought maybe he was talking about Ben Rothwell, but we'll get to that in a minute.
This last one on my list here, and you can throw in some news if you have anything after that, but Brendan Schaub has been banned from the UFC Now show on Fight Pass because according to him, he doesn't fall because I don't fall in line.
I'm not sure what that means.
Basically, I think he was told he's not towing the company line. I guess the commentators have to perhaps push certain issues on the show or talk about certain things, and I guess they had a difference of what his role was going to be on the show. So his quote is he's been banned from UFC Now.
So I still don't understand what it is he wasn't towing the company line on. Was he talking bad about Reebok? What was he doing?
Oh, let me look here. I had a link here. Just one sec.
Peter is pulling up his notes.
Yes, I am. I know. So as someone says on another program, this is terrible radio.
Or you should have said, "Entertain the people."
Yeah, no, I already did reference that show before today. Let's see here. I had it, and it just closed on me. Alright, so he was one of the first to speak negatively about the Reebok deal.
I knew
and has made other disparaging comments about the promotion's business ventures.
Yeah, that'll get you banned from a UFC show. You don't talk bad about Reebok. That's a no-no.
I guess I'm unsupportive of certain issues that link up with the UFC. So you won't see Big Brown on UFC Now anymore. I have been banned.
I really don't find that surprising. I had a feeling it had something to do with Reebok.
Mm-hmm. But, I think it's a way for him to keep his name in the news.
Yeah, well, he can claim it, even if it's not true, just to get people talking about him. You're right about that.
Alright, so let's move on to World Series of Fighting this past weekend in Memphis, Tennessee.
That's right, World Series of Fighting 27. They call this one Future Champs. So, Peter, in your estimation, did they find any future champs on this card? What did you think?
Well, the main event was surprising. Firmino and Fodor. But there was one fight on the prelims that I had this show on in the background, and there's the first fight that I thought I missed it, to be honest. Because when I turned it on, it was showing the replay. I was like, oh, I didn't miss it.
You're talking about the fight that ended in 30 seconds, aren't you?
Yeah. Alvin Williams knocked out Wes Sharp in literally 30 seconds.
Hit him with a beautiful kick to the head, picture perfect timing. Started to follow up on the ground, and Herb Dean jumped in immediately because he was already out cold before he even started the ground and pound.
Yeah. Oh no, he was. It's like uh, get the smelling salts.
hmm If you want to see it, I've got an animated GIF of it up on MMA Mania right now in my post-fight recap. So if you missed the fight, if you didn't have NBC Sports or Fight Network or whatever it airs on in your local market, you can go see the highlights.
All right, why don't you talk about the main event?
All right, well, that was Luis Firmino, a.k.a. Buscape, stepping in on short notice to replace Mike the Martian Ricci, who pulled out of this card due to a hip injury. And Firmino told me before the fight that he didn't mind the short notice. He was ready to go at any time. He had already fought some of the toughest guys in the lightweight division in World Series fighting, and his record backs that up. He'd beaten both Jacob Volkman and Tyson Griffin before this fight. Even though he hadn't been back in World Series fighting in a while, he didn't look like he was rusty in any way, shape, or form, so his training with the Black Zillions was obviously keeping him in peak condition, and he came out there and fought what I would call a classic Buscape fight, which is not super exciting. Dana White buried him for it when he was on The Ultimate Fighter for ATT versus Black Zillions, said the guy was a wet blanket in the cage, but you know what? He can say that. Dana White can knock it if he wants to, but it works for him. He takes guys down. He stays on top of them. He does just enough to not get stood up, and he controls where the fight goes and what happens in the fight. He doesn't take a lot of damage, and he doesn't let his opponents do anything to him. So it is an effective strategy. Whether you like it, whether you call it exciting or not, I would argue it could be tough to watch if you're not into seeing a fighter use strategy to dominate a fight. But if you understand the game and you understand the science of it, he's doing what he has to win because it's what works for him. It's his style, and if you're going to beat his style, you better have a way to neutralize his takedowns and keep it standing. And unfortunately for Carlos Floater, this wasn't his day for that. He couldn't stop the takedowns. Not till the third round anyway, and by that point, by the third round, it was too late because he was already in a hole.
If you can't stop the takedowns, you're not going to win against Firmino.
That's pretty much the story. It's kind of like a Ben Askren fight. If you can't stop the takedown, that's your problem.
What about Gazmatov and Holder?
Well, I had higher expectations for Holder. I thought he was going to be able to go in there and stand and bang. I thought Kemzatov was an unproven quantity since he'd only been fighting Russians. Well, I think we can erase that doubt now because Kemzatov proved he was the real deal. Unfortunately, there may be some controversy to the way he did it because in the fight, Holder claimed that he had been poked in the eye. He looked at Herb Dean as if to get a stoppage to either have his eye checked or maybe get it flushed out so he could see. Herb Dean told him to keep fighting because he didn't see the eye poke and he didn't think there was anything wrong. And while Holder was in the midst of complaining, Herb Dean is telling him, defend yourself, keep fighting, defend yourself. And he didn't. And you know what happens to guys when they don't defend themselves and somebody is swinging heavy hands. You get hurt. You get hurt big time. He got dropped to his knees with a right hand, and Gamzatov swarmed on and pounded it out and got the stoppage at 2 minutes and 32 seconds.
Did you get the number of that truck?
Yeah, Holder's probably still wondering what the hell happened to him, and I felt bad for the guy because it was a mental mistake on his part. He shouldn't have stopped fighting to complain about the eye poke. Even if he did get poked in the eye, I'd have to watch it again to tell you for sure whether he did or he didn't. But you can't just stop and not continue fighting if the referee doesn't stop the fight. You have to let him do his job and you have to do your job.
All right, Bryce Mitchell and Jorge Medina.
Well, Bryce Mitchell's nickname is Thug Nasty. And you wouldn't think it looking at him. He looks like a kid who is respectfully just out of puberty. He's kind of got like that Sage Northcutt thing going without the GQ model looks. He's very young and obviously has a lot of raw talent. Probably needs a little polishing if he's going to keep fighting bigger and better guys, but he took advantage of the situation here and used his superior jiu-jitsu game to get a rear naked choke, and afterwards declare that he might not look like a thug, but in Memphis he's a thug on these streets. It was a pretty good promo. I had more respect for the kid for having some personality. And you know what? You want to fight in 63 seconds, you cut a good promo afterward, I want to see you fight again. So my hat's off to him.
All right, rounding out the main card, Jaleel White. Jaleel White. Jesus.
Yeah, you're all over the map
Willis
today.
and Chauncey Foxworth.
Yes. Chauncey Foxworth came in with only 1 or 2 fights on his record as a pro. Jaleel Willis was definitely the more experienced fighter, and it showed. He used his strength and his wrestling technique to control his opponent, but then it got a little funky because he got caught with an elbow to the nose right at the end of the second round, and in the third round, he was still clearly winning the fight, but they had to stop the fight twice because there was so much blood coming out of his face that Herb Dean was genuinely concerned that the guy was having some sort of problem, either that he couldn't see or that the blood loss would be too severe to continue. And both times they had the doctor come in, clean up the cut, and take a look at him, and it wasn't impeding his vision because it wasn't under or over either eye, and they're like, okay, keep fighting. So he ended up spraying his blood all over his opponent. I'm not exaggerating. When I use the word spray, I mean this is like if you cut a slit into a garden hose that was running at full blast. It was just spraying out like a leaking hose.
Oh, well, that's why there's doctors there, right?
Yes, indeed. And they did the best they could to stem the tide and clot up the blood a little bit. But when you're fighting and the adrenaline's pumping and the blood's throwing through your veins, you're not going to be able to stop a cut for long.
No, absolutely not. Any other thoughts from the prelims?
Well, I believe we already mentioned it, but there was the fight that ended in 30 seconds. So, yeah, that was probably the highlight of the prelims, was just watching that just sweet timed kick to the head by Alvin Williams, putting away Wes Sharp. Go out of your way to watch the highlights of that.
All right, let's move on to this weekend's shows with Bellator, with the main event of Paul Daly and Andy Urick.
Very intriguing fight, Peter. Now, you know and I know that Andy Urick is the real deal because we've had him as a guest on our show.
Mm-hmm.
So I give him every chance in the world of going in there and doing what he said he would do when I interviewed him for MMA Mania. He wants to stun the world like the stunner that he is. He's got every chance of doing that. However, the problem here is that he's facing one of the most fearsome strikers in combat sports. I say combat sports because I'm including both MMA and kickboxing in his record. And when you combine those two together and you look at the things that Paul Daly has accomplished in his career, he's put out a lot of lights on a lot of different people. And I hate saying this because you know I like Andy Urick personally, and I would love to see him get the upset. I think that would be fun. But we've seen him get knocked out by Ben Brewer on the prelims of a Bellator pay-per-view. And I think you and I can both agree on this, and you can correct me if I'm wrong about it. Paul Daly is a better striker than Ben Brewer.
Okay.
You agree, right? You don't. I'm not barking up the wrong tree here.
No. I get you.
So this is probably not going to be a good night for Andy Urick. Would it be fun if he did upset him? Yes. Is he going to? Probably not.
No, probably not. But Daly is. I hate saying it, but you don't think he's getting too old to, you know what I mean? Like, the power is still there, but is it at the same level?
Well, it's funny you should ask me that because I said as much to him in my interview, and check it out on MMA Mania this week. Cheap plug. I know, cheap plug. But listen to what he had to say. Read what he had to say. Either way, check it out on MMA Mania because I said to him, you've had over 50 pro MMA fights. It's not counting your kickboxing fights as well. You're 32, but you've got a lot of experience for a guy at 32. How long can you keep doing this? And he told me, I'm giving you a scoop right here because you're hearing it before you read it. He said 2 more years tops. I won't travel after 35. I might still take some fights in Europe, but it's just too much. It's too hard on me. It's too hard on my body. I can't keep going around the world for fights.
Well, and you said it with a thick accent too, right?
Actually, his accent really isn't that thick, at least not to me, but I watch a lot of British TV.
All right. Well, I'm picking Daly for this fight. I don't know about you.
I am indeed. I think I already said as much.
All right,
Again,
let's move on
that
to.
is no disrespect to our guest, Andy Urich. We still like him. He's welcome on our show at any time, of course. But he's got a very tough road ahead.
All right, let's talk about Paul Bradley and Chris Honeycutt.
Well, this fight happened once before. This happened at Bellator 140. And as you recall, Peter, they did not get a decision in this fight because there were multiple head clashes. When they would grapple with each other, they'd butt heads. And it happened enough times that finally there was a huge gash opened up on Bradley's forehead, and it was waved off. He was ruled that he could not continue the fight. They couldn't just stuff up the cut. They couldn't stem the bleeding. I don't know if it was down to the bone or anything, but it was bad enough that the doctor wasn't going to let him continue. And since the second round wasn't complete, they ruled the fight a no contest. So, here we are again. Got to settle the issue we didn't settle last time. But last time, I predicted that Honeycutt would win the fight, and what he showed me early in the fight the first time suggested I was right about that, because they're both very, very experienced wrestlers, but there's 2 advantages that Chris Honeycutt has. The first is that he's got less wear and tear on his body because he's 6-0 with 1 no contest as of the last fight. Whereas his opponent Bradley, 22-6 with 2 no contests as of the last fight. So, little more wear and tear on Bradley. He's also a little bit older, and if it comes down to who can out-wrestle the other over the course of 3 rounds, I was already seeing it in the first fight, so my prediction remains the same here. I think Honeycutt will edge it out.
All right, Rafael Butler against Tony Johnson.
Well, Butler had some very interesting things to say. You already know where you can go to read that, so I don't need to plug it again. But he told me that he's going to reign at some point as the heavyweight champion because unlike certain other people who have a pro wrestling career, he's not fighting a bunch of scrubs.
All right, and we talked about Pitbull and Couture.
Yes, and I really do think that Couture is going to take advantage of the situation here. I think it's too quick for Frary to come back, so I'm picking Butler to win, and I'm picking Couture to win.
All right, let's move on to, unless there's anything else on the prelims on this show you want to talk about before we move on to UFC.
No, I believe you might want to talk about something on the prelims, because there is a women's fight if you want to get into that, if that piques your fancy at all.
I don't see that fight on my list. Which one's that?
That would be Alima McFarland versus Amber Tackett at flyweight.
Oh, okay, flyweight fight. Okay. I've seen Amber Tackett fight. I'll pick her.
All right, fair enough. I'll go with Alima McFarland just because. Why not?
All right, let's talk about the UFC on Fox 18 card. It's going to have Anthony Johnson and Ryan Bader in the main event.
Yeah, it's a light heavyweight ranking showdown between the number 2 and the number 4 guys in the division. Very tough fight, but Rumble Johnson, as of the last news, is the favorite going into this contest. How do you see it, Peter?
Well, I've been instructed by somebody else that lives here that Ryan Anakin Skywalker Bader will not win this fight. He is not worthy of being called Darth at the moment.
Well, Johnson is minus 325. He does have more knockout power between the 2 of them. But the interesting thing is their records are almost identical. Rumble Johnson is 20-5. Bader is 20-4. So whether you like Bader or not, you can give him the old wet blanket tag if you want to, like Luis Firmino earlier. You can't say it's not effective. He's won 5 fights in a row, And he's beaten some very tough guys like Rashad Evans and Phil Davis. So don't take anything away from Bader in this fight just because Johnson has more knockout power and is the favorite going in. He's minus 325. Bader is plus 265. But I'd say at plus 265, he's a live dog.
Well, I have some odds here that might not be as current as the ones you have. I have Johnson at a minus 310 and Bader at plus 260.
Well, that's virtually the same thing.
Yeah. Josh Barnett and Ben Rothwell.
Well, this one is more of a coin flip. Maybe your odds are different than mine. You can tell me if they are, but I've got Barnett as the number 8 ranked heavyweight at minus 135. The number 7 Ben Rothwell plus 115.
Pretty much the same numbers I have on my list.
And I like Barnett in this fight. I think Rothwell is very game. I think Rothwell beats opponents that people don't expect him to beat, and that's why he's in the position he is in the rankings right now. But I think Barnett's experience and his catch wrestling style are just going to be too much for Rothwell to handle. I think it may not be an exciting fight, but I think it will be a dominant fight. Unless Rothwell puts a hand on him early and wobbles him and forces him to run, I think Barnett probably controls this fight against the cage and then takes him down when he can to finish out rounds.
I hope if Barnett wins, he cuts a post-fight promo and says, "Hi, Morrow."
That would be fun if he did.
Jimmy Rivera against Uri Alcantara.
Well, this one is intriguing to me because of the fact that Alcantara is the more notorious fighter, more well-known fighter, but Rivera hasn't lost a fight since 2008, and he's 18-1, which means even though Alcantara is the ranked fighter at number 14, he's not the favorite here. Rivera is the favorite at minus 170.
Yeah, pretty much. I'm surprised by this one. I'll go take Alcantara on an upset.
I'll go with Rivera. I like what the kid's shown in his last 2 UFC fights. I think he's got it.
After you say if the sirens go off near my place, I'm like, oh, that's the red light special. Sage Northcutt, I think I've heard of him. Against Brian Barberena.
Yeah, funny, I just mentioned him a little bit ago when we were talking about another fight. So, yeah, again, like Thug Nasty, he's young and he's talented, a little better looking, maybe a little better skilled. It's hard to say at this point because they're both so young in their career, but if you're talking strictly about who's the favorite here, he is a heavy favorite over Barberena, minus 470 to plus 375. I like those odds for Northcutt. I think he wins handily.
Have you ever had a chance to interview Sage Northcutt?
No, he's come along as a phenom in the last year or so, so haven't had a chance to talk to him just yet.
If I can plug the Review Away Christmas show this year, he was their big surprise interview at the end of the show.
Very cool.
You could tell he's very young in the interview, but, I mean, the person you see on TV is exactly like the interview, like it's basically, it's not like some fighter.
He's not a phony.
No, exactly.
That's good. That's part of the reason I respect him, even though some people think he's too much of a pretty boy and some people don't like all the backflips and the breakdancing he does. I just think it's cool that he's got his own personality and he's his own man and he's going to do things his way.
He reminds me, I don't want to give him this tag right away, but he reminds me of a young Uriah Faber.
A little bit. I can see the comparison because I've been watching Faber fight for a long time, and I remember when he was a lot younger than he is now, so you're really not that far off. A WEC Uriah Faber is a pretty fair comparison.
Alright, so the last one on the main card is Tarek Safadine against Jake Ellenberger.
And Safadine would be the favorite in this fight.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
Well, I know how much you like Ellenberger, but I'm going to go with Safadine.
Well, believe it or not, I'm actually going with him as well.
If he loses this fight, is he cut?
I don't think I'd cut Ellenberger off this loss, but I would say it's definitely Safadine's fight to lose here because Ellenberger's been having some troubles of late, and Safadine has been inactive for a while, so he needs to come back and prove himself in a big way.
Fair enough. Let's see what else we have on this card. Kevin Casey against Rafael Natal would be good.
Oh yeah, I expect that to be a good fight. I think King Casey will probably win.
Olivier Aubin-Mercier against Diego Ferreira, which, that one could be explosive.
Yeah, I mean, Aubin-Mercier is one of those guys I've tagged as a future prospect, so every time he fights, I always get really into his fights. He's looking better every single time.
Alex Caceres against Macio Fulham will kick off the FS1 prelims.
Sure, that'll be an intriguing fight as well.
I like Bruce Leroy.
Yeah, I do too.
Alright, so other than that, it's going to be a good card overall. Check it out. It's on Fox, so the main show's on Fox networks there. I find it funny up here in Canada, they're airing them on TSN2, the prelims, and also on CTV2, so a rare national channel, basically. Like a secondary national channel, so you don't have to have the sports network to get the prelims, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, it's very cool. Good news for you.
The only problem is it's running head-to-head against the All-Star Skills competition.
I thought you were going to say it was running head-to-head against John Scott.
We're not going there.
Oh, we're not? Okay, I guess we're not.
For those who don't know, John Scott, I'm not going to go into the whole story, but basically he got voted in by the fans, and then he subsequently got traded to the other conference, and the league has decided that he'll still captain one of the teams, and because the team that traded for him sent him down to the minors, because he plays 5 minutes a night, and he's basically an enforcer, and when he got traded to Montreal sent him right to the minors, and there's a rule in place saying if you play in the minors, you are not eligible to play in the NHL All-Star Game, so they're making an exception in this case.
They're making an exception because of the fact that the fans voted him in, and the fans were outraged that the NHL basically, if you believe the conspiracy theory here, the NHL purposefully stuck it to the fans for making what they perceived to be a joke vote. But if the fans want a joke in the All-Star Game, that's their right.
Well, to bring this show full circle, I'll bring it back to the Denver Broncos. You want to talk conspiracy theories about the Peyton Manning retirement angle for the superb owl.
Oh, of course. How did I know you were going to talk about the creative booking of the National Football League, as our friend Danny would say?
Yeah, superb owl, he says. Not the Super Bowl, the superb owl.
Mm-hmm. Yes, NFL Creative wanted Cam Newton versus Peyton Manning. That's all it's about to him.
Well, the only thing I could say is, and it works in MMA and it works in wrestling too, this could be an instance of someone passing the torch to the next generation.
It could be, or it could be that the old Lion still has enough in him. And look at that Denver defense. Look at the way they shut down Brady. If they can do that to the New England Patriots, you don't think they can do that to the Carolina Panthers? I bet you they can.
Well, I'm sure we're going to hear 100 Omahas in that game.
Win or lose, we're going to hear that. You can bet on it.
All right, well, that's going to do it for an episode of Glow Up or Shut Up this week. Stevie, you got any closing plugs?
Yeah, check out Thursday Night AMP, Great Sudoku, Jordan Garber, occasionally our friend Abby. We'll talk about the fallout from the Royal Rumble, and we'll talk about all the latest news from New Japan Pro Wrestling. We'll probably talk about TNA and Lucha Underground a little bit. It'll be some good times. You won't want to miss it. Yeah,
there's a big signing actually this week by TNA this week.
Yes, indeed. Big signing by TNA, a big debut in WWE. A lot of news, a lot of things to talk about. So we're not going to spoil it all here on the Mixed Martial Arts Show. Tune in on Thursday night for the Pro Wrestling Show.
It's not Brock Lesnar, trust me.
No, it's not.
All right. Well, for Stevie J, I'm Peter H., the Hardcore Canadian. Thanks for listening. And as I always say, never leave it to the judges. Good night, everybody.
See ya.